Yes, lots of Gegend, as we say in Germany, many forests. So it's nothing special, and that's what I love about this place. Yeah.
Fantastic. So thank you so much once again, Marcus. And so over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So my name is Markus Bütterhoff. I'm product owner, and I'm not a developer. So today we want to get started with Azure Functions with PowerShell. So what we try to achieve is to use our PowerShell skills to build great microservices. So it also maybe sound like an developer session, but hopefully it gives you an introduction of how you can use your existing skills to create all these great functions. Okay, a little bit of history from myself. For me, PowerShell is a simple tool set. Like for the most of you, as I said, I'm not a developer. I might be able to write some C# code from history, but not all these fancy Node.js stuff like my dev colleagues do on a daily basis. I'm history as a SharePoint consultant, so I used to use PowerShell mainly for configuration, installation things, modifying, migrating data, or doing recurring tasks like in the on-premises days or warming up the SharePoint servers every morning. So I think, so as many of you, I like or I really love PowerShell. And so if the question comes up, if I can use C#, Node.js to create my Azure functions, why should I use PowerShell for this? Because you can, because I can. And so this was my motivation. At the very end, I've got a slide to show you a real world project, the project where I got in touch to Azure Functions. And so this helped me out because I, at the end, got in struggle with logic apps, and PowerShell helped me out this way. And so Azure Functions. Okay, so Azure Function itself consists of different parts. What's obviously the most important thing is the function itself. It's a code. And then we got triggers for several events. If we use an HTTP trigger, we build something like a web API. If we've got queue storage as a trigger, we've create a reliable message queue system. And this is really great, I think. We'll see all this. Data bindings is not mandatory and is used to work with incoming or outgoing data. And all these things together build the Azure Functions. Before we now can go ahead to create our first Azure Functions, we might want to set up our environment. We directly start in a few seconds within the Azure portal, and we can develop, so to speak, in the Azure portal. But if we want to do local development, of course, we need an Azure account. I think that's probably clear. We have to install Azure Function Core Tools. Provided the link at the very end, you get more resources and links for me to get started. And we want to use Visual Studio Code. It's not necessary to use Visual Studio Code, but I think it makes many things easier. And I've written down some extensions which might help us and which we'll see in the next few minutes. And I use PowerShell Core. PowerShell Core because it's the runtime for Azure Function. Okay, so like I said in the previous slide, the code, the function code, is just a part of Azure Functions. When we go from outside to inside, we have to have an Microsoft account, Azure, obviously. And what we create first is a resource group. Within the resource group, we choose which plan do we use, consumption plan, app service plan. So we might decide this because of our budget or regarding to our other needs. And then we create a function app. The function app hosts the code, the configuration, and various settings for our function. And all these is stored within Azure Blob Storage. So what we see in the next slides is how we create the resource group. After that, create the function app. The small bulb on the top right of each consumption plan points to application insights. We use application insights for advanced monitoring. We created as well in the next minutes. So let's go ahead, create the resource group, and after that we create our first function app. Due to the situation that it's on several steps, it takes a little bit to warm up, download code, and these things I pre-recorded these things. So if it might be too fast at this point, I think we'll cover all these settings later on when we go in the live part. So as I said, the first thing is we log into our Azure portal, create a resource group, give it a name, choose the region. Here I choose West Europe, and that's it. That's our folder for all the resources we create. Our resource group is available, and this is how the resource group looks like, with many settings, cost management, monitoring, and these things. And what we want to do now is to create the function app itself. The function app, again, when we see remind the slide of the anatomy, the function app itself is connected with the code, with the storage account, and application insights for monitoring. And while we create the function app, we'll also be asked to provide several other settings. You here create the function app, use our previously created resource group, give it a name, runtime. The only runtime which is available is PowerShell Core 7.0. We use West Europe as the location, create a new storage account, and this really helps us. We use a consumption plan. And this time, in the next step, we add new application insights. Although the portal and the wizard here provides some data for us, we want to change our name so that it fits our needs. Here we see a review, and after that we click on create, and that time deployment takes a few seconds. And after function app has been created, our resource group is filled up with application insights, again for monitoring, the service plan we choose, the function app that we created, and the storage account that we also decided to create. Okay, so if we want to go ahead and work with PowerShell and PowerShell code, we really have to add a function. The function itself hosts the code. What we did now is some magic around the code, which is necessary. Again, when we remind the slide with the anatomy, the code itself is provided within the function itself. We go to the function app in the portal, create the function. We choose to develop in the portal, in the Azure portal, choose an HTTP trigger, give it a name, for example, hello world, and leave the authorization level with the default settings. Okay. So this took us a few minutes, but at the end, we created our function. Here it is, our hello world function. So what's in here? We see I previously created this one so that we don't have to watch any thrubbers, and go directly to code and test. Takes its time. Okay, cool. We're provided with a demo code and function. All our code runs in to the run.ps1 file. We have several other files to modify our settings from the function, but we'll focus on the run.ps1 file. When the function is executed, will be provided with two parameters, the request parameter and the triggering metadata. We'll write to the host, and if a name parameter is either provided by a query parameter or within the body of a request, we then change the body and put in the name parameter. If not, the default body will be provided at the end. Okay, so the great of the function development in the portal is we can directly go ahead and run this. If we run this, we will provide the name Azure, and if anything goes right, we'll get back hello Azure. Okay, we'll open up the logs, so it's connected to our function app. May take a second. Okay, great. What we can see here is that the function has been executed and the response content contains hello Azure. Okay, so no fake at the end. I think you believe that, but nonetheless, here it works. Hello PowerShell. Okay, we can now also, of course, trigger the function from outside the portal, not only within this development environment in Azure. And to use our newly created HTTP trigger function, our web API, we can get the function URL. Okay, I will copy this to the clipboard, and we'll get our function app. It's the function app website /API hello world, which is the name of the function, and here we get our code. So when we created the function, we said that we want to use function security. We've got a function code which is only available for this function, and so security is currently only done by this code, but yeah, you have to know this. Okay, cool. And we provide the name. And here we go. We'll get back from our PowerShell the response. Great. Very cool. And we now can use these Azure function anywhere we want to. Okay, we saw here the executions are shown in the log. And for example, what we PowerShell guys want to do is to use this from PowerShell. Just a second. We'll provide the name parameter in the body. I'll copy this function URL, test method. Provide the body, and here we go. We can now use this web API to Azure Functions, and so it's I think up to you how we can use it. So but from my perspective, it's a very cool and easy way to get started, to have logic in PowerShell built up as a microservice in Azure and use it from anywhere you want. Okay, so what we want to do now, we created our script, have a demo script, and now we can, of course, play a little bit around with this, get very exciting logic in here. Our standard greeting is hello. If the hour is something between 12 and 18, we say good afternoon. This greeting here, we could also say right. So we'll see it here. Say save and run this. Again, takes a second. Few seconds. Okay. Good afternoon. So, and now we can go on and enhance our script to fit it to our needs. Like I said previously, this developer console might not be the best place where we want to create and modify our PowerShell scripts. So this may be for some simple, easy scripts we want to execute, but I think our console should be a Visual Studio Code. Okay, what I did here is I will copy my code. I created a skeleton PowerShell script, pass in the name parameter fix as VS Code, and write host the body. I can delete it. So cool. We can now go on and enhance the script again. Just a few simple things. Say day of week and functions are successfully on day. Okay, great. So we'll get advanced step by step. Now it says good afternoon and it executes on Saturday. We could do copy and paste deployment at this point. Save the code. and it executes, and it's now executed successfully on Saturdays. So I think you now can imagine how the Azure function works. You see how we can modify the script within the portal and also with Visual Studio Code, but it's not a really great experience. And so we want to go to the next step with our development environment and directly start to develop our script from Visual Studio Code. Okay, so the next one I prepared again is to create the second function app. Same we did previously. Choose function app, give it a name. Here it's VS Code at the end. Again, choose PowerShell Core in version 7 and West Europe as the region. We don't want to create a new storage account. New application insights with the previously created ones. And that's it. Okay, and as I said previously, it takes time to deploy the function app. I will later come back to the reason why should we create more than one function app. We also might have chosen to create a new function within the existing function app. Like I said, we'll get back to that later. Okay, the function app itself is prepared. So we will at the end deploy the code that we develop locally in Visual Studio Code to this function app. Okay. Let's see Visual Studio Code. I think you're familiar with that. So a few topics to highlight. Here we see I'm connected using the Azure tools in Visual Studio Code to my Azure portal, and I've got an add-in, an extension for Azure, which will I use to create the new function. Creating a new function is the same way that we created in the portal. We choose the runtime, we provide a trigger or choose a trigger and provide a name. So, and also this might take a few seconds or minutes when it comes up. So here we go, create a new function. We want to use PowerShell as a language and HTTP trigger to execute it. Since it's a new function app, we also could use the same name, but we here choose another name. Cool. And now our local project is up and running. What we see here is our Visual Studio Code console, and we recognize the run.ps1 file from our function we created previously. We're provided with the same basic function, and we can use this and go ahead. Okay, give me a second to show my Visual Studio Code. So hopefully it's better for you to view. So I choose the light theme here. Okay, great. So this is our run.ps1 file. We've got also many other files within this newly created project. I provide several links that go through each file. I think we are not able to cover all these things today. So our function is ready to start, and all I have to do now to start the function is hit F5. What we see here, func host start, which starts the function locally, and we are now able to open up on localhost our function. No key at the end because it's local, and if I say name is Markus and go back to Azure, we see this function has been executed. Okay, for you to see, yeah, something is happening around here. Okay, cool. So this might be the way we want to go forward, creating our functions directly in Visual Studio Code, because now it's definitely easier for us to for example, debug, setting a breakpoint here. Oh, sorry. What I'll have to do here is to end up, restart. And on another window, I will access a function, and we're hitting the breakpoint. Great. So now we can really start to go through, and, for example, see what's within all these variables. Nothing shown here. Okay, and what you see, it's here in the breakpoint. And if I say 1, 2, 3, nothing happens because I'm here in the breakpoint. Okay, and it goes on, and I executed it twice. And here it you can see the function is queuing our request. Okay, so I did it twice. All messages in the queue are executed, and so that's it. We can now easily debug our Visual Studio Code. Doing it again, let's see it here. Our variables, I provided Markus 1, 2, 3 as the name parameter. See which content has the triggering metadata. It's the name itself, function name, function directory, all these things. But what I am missing is something like an immediate console to play a little bit around with all this data, with all the scripts. And so if we want to use this, we have to start our function from within PowerShell, from a PowerShell session. And just give me a second. What we have to add here is a wait debugger. This sets an attaching a point for the debugger, and is necessary if we really want to step in the code. Okay. Here, work. What's very, very important, I make some mistakes several times. If we later on deploy our code to Azure, we have to uncomment or delete this line, because otherwise, in every execution, the function app is waiting for us to attach to a debugging session, which won't happen in the cloud. Okay, what do we do next? I will go to my Azure function directory and Azure Func host start. We've seen this in the Visual Studio Console, and we see the Azure Function core tools are running here, giving us our web API, the Hello World function. Okay, that's cool. And if we now wanna step in to this execution and debug, we have to access the run space in another PowerShell session. What we see here with get PS host process info are all the PowerShell host processes, and we want to enter the .NET process. Enter process with a name, ID 256. Okay, cool. Get in to the debug run space. And of course, hit the function. And what we'll see here is we get information that it's entering the debug mode. I can put an H to get the help, put an L to get a list of the code, what is executed, and if I now say body, I see what's in the body variable, or let's have a look at the request variable. Okay, we see what's in there. Query name, and so I see what's in the request query name parameter. It's a parameter we provided here. So a little bit advanced debugging and options. So maybe not the first thing to start with, but I struggled a little bit with this when I started, and so I think it's very good to know. And as I said at the end, I've provided several links where you can read this step by step, and hopefully this session also helps you to get started. Okay, cool. What we now is end up our processes so that the port is not blocked anymore. Cool. As I said, next step is to deploy our function, and we want to delete the wait debugger and deploy our function. Okay, that's the local project we created. And I can now choose deploy to a function app. Within the portal, we created first the function app and then storage account and these things. And after that, we created the function. Here, it's necessary that we have created a function app previously. And now I can go ahead and publish it to our function app that we created second. Here's a warning that's very important if you use it the first time. We deploy this complete project. Until now, it only consists of one function. We deploy this complete project to this function app, and it will override the previous deployments. So it's a one-way direction. And we can deploy all or nothing. And that's the reason why we created two function app. In one function app, we modify our code from within the Azure portal, and from within Visual Studio Code, we push our code to the other Azure function. Okay, also this takes a second. Deployment is successful, but it's not the last step here. But we can go ahead. We see our second function app is up and running. And what we see here is our previously deployed function. And so this is what I'm talking about. So this app is now in read-only mode from the portal. I'm able to modify this within the app settings, but the deployment here is done very easy. Like you can see here, it's a zip file. The zip file is downloaded to Azure, and that's the deployment. Of course, you can use other deployment slots and mechanism to do it in a more professional way. But I think that's more than only getting started. Okay, what we can do now here is see our Hello World function. Everywhere we see the warning. But even if we're not able to modify the code, we are able to execute the code, test run it from here. Parameter is here. Okay, that was really fast. Our function has been triggered. We can get again the function URL, pass parameter. Okay, cool. Our second function within the second function app is up and running. This time, our starting point was not the Azure portal, but Visual Studio Code. Okay. So what we did with the last two functions is using an HTTP request as a trigger. We want to now go ahead, create a second function and use storage queue as a trigger. So every time a message is put into the queue, the Azure function starts. I will go to my, okay, deployment successfully within this. I can now go ahead within my local project. I create a new function. This time I use the Azure Queue Storage Trigger, give it a name, Queue Trigger VS. I'm not that creative. We'll also have to provide an connection string that is stored within some JSON files for the function app. It reads our settings JSON file, and we choose this as our connection to our queue, setting the name to PSQ items, and that's it. Now we get our run PS1, which is way smaller than previously. We get two parameters, queue item triggering metadata. We know this one. And all we do now is to give back the message that has been put into the queue. Okay, like I previously said, the connection string to the queue itself is also provided in the settings, but not the queue itself. Within the Azure tools, I've got storage tools, and now connect to the local storage emulator, because we now develop our this to be started. We develop our function completely local and create a queue. We provide the name Okay, did paste it. Here we go. So it's PSQ items. Okay, great. Our function that is triggered by a queue is now ready to go. What do we have? We have a storage queue connected to the connection string to through the connection string to the local queue. And we've got the function and what we okay, if it does not work, don't know what that means. We'll have a view. So what we see, if we hit F5, it not only runs our newly created queue trigger function, but also our HTTP trigger hello world function. So both are up and running now. So, and if we now use the Azure Storage Explorer, also a tool which automatically is installed with all the packages are linked, we see we can also access the local queue. We see here we are connected to our storage queue, and all we have to do now is to provide a new message into the queue. And as you see, ta-da, like magic, our message has been processed. Right host directly the queue item. Yeah, and we now have a second function which is triggered by a storage queue, and we'll see later on in the diagram how we can use all this. So now it really doesn't matter if the queue item is filled in through a browser, through a logic app, through a Power Automate flow, or through any kind of things. Our function can be easily triggered through adding an item into this queue. Okay. You have to be aware of, if you try this out yourself, this string will convert everything what's coming in to a string. If you, like I did, provide a JSON file, this is not really helpful if the parameter is a string. Take me a while to figure that out. Okay, just small tip. Cool. So what we do now, we've got our second function. We don't want to spend much time to modify this function. What we want to do next is deploy this function app. As I said, okay, we'll choose the function app. Again, the warning. Yes. So we have to tweak around a little settings into the Azure portal. What we did previously is we connected to a local queue here. And what we have to do now is to have a look at the function app and add the storage account and also provide a queue in Azure. So within our storage account that has been automatically created with the creation of our first function app. Scroll down a little bit, we've got a queue service. Within this queue service, we don't have any queues. So what we do now is to add this queue. Okay, great. So the queue is here now. Great. And hopefully our function is also up and running. We'll have a look at it. Hit refresh. Here it is. Our second function is also now available. And before we get into this function, we have a look at the configuration of this function app. Within the function app, as a default settings, we've got a connection string, Azure Web Jobs Storage, which points to the according queue storage. Okay, so nothing here for us to do because we've got the connection string. The connection string is provided automatically and directly when we create the function. Okay. Now have a look at the function itself. Again, the warning, we cannot modify this code from within the portal since we published it from Visual Studio Code. Okay, this is our very, very basic function, and Hello Cloud is provided for testing purposes. We see the function has processed with a work item Hello Cloud. Okay, I will leave this window open, and what we'll now do is to add a message Hello Cloud 2 and see what happens. And hopefully our function executes triggered by the item we put in the queue. Okay, so very cool. Maybe interesting to know is we've got these queue items we created manually. If I add in messages that are not allowed, like with the German umlaut here this time with Bütterhoff, it fails. Automatically, Azure creates a poison queue. And you now can go ahead and have a look at this poison queue to see which messages have not been able to be executed by our function. Okay, cool. Automatically created. Yes, and so last step is that just a second, sorry. What would now be interesting is if we've got an environment where we have flows, logic apps, other Azure functions which provide us data into our storage queue, it would be great to use our live queue in Azure and debug it locally or execute our function locally. So this is very easy. At this time, all we have to do now is to point our Azure function to a different storage. Okay, we've got our connection string I provided previously in the background, Azure Web Jobs Storage Cloud. I get this connection to my cloud queue, and in the function JSON, I can simply modify this, set the connection to the storage cloud, which points to our which points to our cloud environment. So that's right. And start up again our run PS1. Which is now connected to our Cloud Queue. Here we go. Takes a second, and so we can dig into the details without modifying all the systems that provide data into this cloud. Into this queue. Okay. So what did we see in the last minutes? We created a function from within the Azure portal. We created two functions from within Visual Studio Code. One function was an HTTP trigger that we can use as a web API for using with PowerShell scripts and from other systems that can execute HTTP request. And the second one is the queue storage, which can also be used as a trigger to create execute our function. Sorry. We've got several other triggers. For example, it's also possible with kind of cron job to run timer-based triggers to run this function every 5 minutes, 2 minutes, what else? Okay, so if we sum up a little bit, well, we summed up what we've seen so far, and here is what I used as a real-world scenario. So I got a SharePoint list, a task list, where tasks are created for contract management systems. Some kind of tasks are, for example, due, and I write a logic app that puts information to this due items to the queue. And I also want to notify a colleague if I created a task and assigned him. And then I built a logic app that executes directly when a new item is created and when creator is not the assigned to. I put all these things to the queue and use the queue as a trigger for my PowerShell Azure function. For the email templates, I stored HTML templates on an Azure storage and sent my mails with SendGrid. For me, it was an easy way because I can handle with PowerShell, I can script. And it was very, very difficult, at least for me, to do all these things with the logic apps. So I had to have different logic apps, and at the end, it was very, very difficult for me to get the HTML templates. But the advantage of the logic apps in this scenario were they are directly connected with an account to the SharePoint, and so I didn't have to take care of authentication against SharePoint using my my Azure function, and now it doesn't really matter if I've got another flow or any other processes which puts in messages into this queue. My Azure function runs, sends the email, and that's it. Okay, so as I said, a few resources to get started about Azure Functions: reference, quick start guide using Visual Studio Code, something about the storage queue and PowerShell, and about the local debugging. And so 5 minutes left, but yeah, that's it now from my side.
Thank you, Marcus. Raz had to pop out, so I'm just popping in. So I'm Narayan Solanki. It was a really good session today. I really learned something out of it. I'm just going to check quickly if anyone has any question. So we got this 5 minutes. We could utilize Marcus' skill to learn something additional. If you have any question, please feel free to type in. There are no questions so far.
No questions. Very quiet in the chat window. Hopefully it was not too deafening. Maybe I can have a look at the script. So maybe also not the best script I ever created, but this is a script or some parts of the script I mentioned in the last slide. And what I do here with a triggering item, I will get the SharePoint items as an JSON and work with these items, create a subject, get information from within the SharePoint items in the JSON, did some fiddling around time zone settings, create the mail table, and at the very end, it's only one line to send an email using SendGrid. Here, that's it. And if you or it was easier in this time for me to provide some payload locally as JSON, and so I don't have to create SharePoint items every time. And so I put in a switch if the script is locally or not, and prior to deployment, I set this to false or true. Yes, so this look at the script, and
that's quite interesting,
yes.
actually. Like, yeah, and that's it opens up a lot more possibilities, isn't it?
Definitely, and I think
yeah.
the cool things also it's mainly development focused, but I'm not a developer, and that's it. I can use my PowerShell skills. I had to learn something from my dev colleagues, from all these Azure resource groups, and what is application insights. How do I do this? How do I do that? But now I'm fine with that, and I didn't have to learn new language.
Absolutely, yeah. There are lots of like information available online on the Microsoft docs.microsoft.com in terms of the PowerShell commands and CMD late. So that could be really useful. If you find that, Marcus, if you can pop into chat, it will be really useful for everyone.
Okay, I will put all these links into the chat. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a really good, useful ones. Yeah. Brilliant. So we got some messages saying, great session, thanks. Very useful session. Thanks for the in-depth intro to Azure Function. Brilliant sessions, great sessions.
Oh,
informative sessions. Fantastic. I'm sure like all our attendees are enjoying it as well. That's really good.
Cool.
So
sounds great.
We're spot on time, Marcus. So let's switch to our next speaker.